My name is Lena, and for as long as I can remember, I dreamed about seeing the world. When I was a little girl, I used to sit by the window of our small house and imagine what life looked like in other countries. I imagined big cities full of lights, quiet libraries where students from many nations studied together, and classrooms where people spoke many languages. My teachers always told me that I was a good student and that if I worked hard, I could study abroad one day. I believed them with all my heart. My family was not rich. We lived in a small town where life moved slowly. My father worked at a small repair shop fixing bicycles and motorcycles. His hands were always dirty with oil, but he never complained. My mother worked at a local market selling vegetables and fruit. Every morning she woke up before the sun and came home tired in the evening. They both worked very hard just to support our family. I was the oldest child. My younger brother Daniel was 6 years younger than me. When he was born, I was already old enough to help take care of him. I remember holding him in my arms when he was still a baby. He had tiny hands and big, curious eyes that always looked at the world with wonder. From the beginning, I loved him very much. Even though life was sometimes difficult, my parents always encouraged me to study. They told me that education was the key to a better future. I listened carefully to my teachers and studied every night. Many evenings, I stayed up late reading books under a small lamp while the rest of the house slept. School became my favorite place in the world. It felt like a door that could lead me somewhere bigger. My English teacher was especially kind to me. She often gave me extra books and helped me practice speaking English after class. One day, she said something that stayed in my heart for many years. "Lena," she told me, "you have the talent to study overseas. If you keep working hard, you can do it." After that day, my dream became very clear. I wanted to study abroad. I wanted to learn more, see more, and grow into the person I believed I could become. When I entered high school, I studied harder than ever. While my friends spent weekends relaxing or going out together, I often stayed home reading or preparing for exams. Sometimes it was lonely, but every time I felt tired, I remembered my dream. Daniel, my little brother, always supported me in his own way. Even when he was young, he understood that studying was important to me. Sometimes he sat quietly next to me while I read books. Other times, he asked me questions about the countries I wanted to visit. "Will you come back when you study abroad?" he asked me once. "Of course," I said with a smile. "I will come back and tell you all the stories." He laughed happily and said he wanted to travel too when he grew up. Years passed quickly. My final year of high school arrived, and everything began to feel serious. My teachers helped me apply for scholarships. I spent many hours filling out forms, writing essays, and preparing for language tests. The process was long and sometimes stressful, but I never gave up. One quiet afternoon, I received an email that changed everything. I had been accepted to a university overseas. Not only that, but I had received a partial scholarship. It did not cover everything, but it was enough to make the dream possible. When I read the message, my hands began to shake with excitement. I ran home as fast as I could. My parents were in the kitchen when I arrived. My mother was preparing dinner, and my father had just come home from work. I held my phone tightly and told them the news. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then my mother smiled with tears in her eyes, and my father placed his hand on my shoulder. "We are proud of you," he said softly. That night, our small house felt full of happiness. We talked about the future for hours. Even Daniel jumped around the room excitedly, asking questions about airplanes and foreign countries. For the first time in my life, my dream felt real. But life has a strange way of changing plans when we least expect it. Only a few weeks later, everything began to fall apart. Daniel started feeling sick. At first, it seemed like a simple illness. He had a fever and felt weak, so my parents took him to the local clinic. The doctor gave him medicine and told him to rest. But the fever did not go away. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel became weaker. My parents grew worried and decided to take him to a larger hospital in the city. I remember sitting in the waiting room that day, feeling nervous without understanding why. After several tests, the doctor asked my parents to speak with him privately. I watched them walk into his office while Daniel sat beside me quietly. When they returned, their faces looked pale and serious. My mother's eyes were red, like she had been crying. That was the moment our lives changed. The doctor explained that Daniel had a serious illness. He needed long treatments and regular hospital visits. The treatment would be expensive, and it would take a long time for him to recover. I remember feeling like the world suddenly became very heavy. My parents tried to stay strong, but I could see the fear in their eyes. The hospital bills were already high, and Daniel's treatment had only just begun. At night, I lay awake thinking about everything. The scholarship covered my tuition, but studying abroad would still cost money. There were travel expenses, living costs, books, and many other things my family would need to support. But now my family had a much bigger problem. Daniel needed care. He needed medicine. He needed our support more than ever. I watched my parents work harder than before. My father took extra hours at the repair shop. My mother stayed longer at the market every day. Still, the money was not enough. One evening, I sat quietly at the kitchen table while my parents discussed the hospital bills. They spoke softly, but I could hear the worry in their voices. At that moment, I understood something clearly. My dream and my brother's health could not exist together. One of them had to wait. The next morning, I opened my laptop and looked at the acceptance letter again. The words that once filled me with happiness now felt distant and painful. For a long time, I stared at the screen. Then I closed the laptop. That evening, I sat down with my parents and told them my decision. "I will stay," I said quietly. They looked at me with surprise. "I can study later," I continued. "Right now, Daniel needs us." My mother immediately shook her head. "No, Lena, this is your dream," she said. But I had already made up my mind. Family was more important. A few weeks later, my friends began preparing to leave for universities in different cities and countries. Some of them shared photos of airplanes, dorm rooms, and exciting new places. I smiled for them, but deep inside my heart, something slowly began to ache, because the life I once imagined was moving forward without me. After I made the decision to stay, life slowly settled into a new routine. The days felt longer than before, and every morning began with the same quiet responsibilities. I woke up early to help my mother prepare breakfast and organize Daniel's medicine before he woke up. His treatments were tiring, and many days he felt too weak to even leave his bed. At first, I believed this difficult time would pass quickly. I told myself that maybe after a year, things would return to normal. Daniel would become healthy again, and I could continue chasing my dream. That thought helped me stay strong during the early months. But life rarely follows the plans we make in our minds. Daniel's treatment took much longer than we expected. There were hospital visits every week, medical bills arriving almost every month, and many nights when my parents looked exhausted from worry. Watching them struggle made me realize how fragile our situation really was. Soon I understood that I could not simply stay home and help occasionally. Our family needed another income, so I began searching for a job. Because I had just finished high school and had little experience, the choices were limited. Eventually, I found work at a small printing shop near the town center. The shop produced school materials, posters, and simple books for local businesses. The work was not exciting, but the owner was kind. He allowed me to start early and leave in the afternoon so I could still help my family at home. My days became a quiet cycle: work in the morning, hospital visits in the afternoon, and housework in the evening. Sometimes I felt older than my age. Meanwhile, my friends began leaving the town one by one. Some went to universities in big cities, and others traveled overseas for their studies. At first, we promised to stay in touch. We sent messages and shared photos of our new experiences. I remember the first time one of my closest friends posted pictures of her campus abroad. She stood in front of a large library building with trees full of golden leaves behind her. Students from many countries were walking around the campus, laughing and talking. She looked so happy. I stared at the picture longer than I expected. For a moment, I imagined myself standing there beside her, holding books and preparing for classes. But when I looked around my small room again, the dream felt very far away. As months passed, the messages from my friends slowly became less frequent. They were busy building their new lives, and I understood that. I never blamed them. Still, sometimes when I saw their updates online, a quiet sadness filled my heart. They were moving forward. I was standing still. The printing shop became my world. I learned how to operate the machines, organize orders, and handle customers. The smell of ink and paper followed me everywhere. At first, I thought I would only stay there for a short time, but the months quietly turned into years. Daniel slowly began to improve. The treatments were working, but recovery required patience. There were still many days when he felt weak, yet his smile returned little by little. Seeing him laugh again made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. But even though I loved my brother deeply, something inside me began to change. At night, when the house became quiet and everyone else was sleeping, I sometimes sat alone by the window. The same window where I once dreamed about the world beyond our small town. The difference was that now my dreams felt complicated. I tried not to think about the life I might have had, but sometimes the thoughts appeared without warning. I imagined what it would feel like to sit in a university classroom abroad, to meet new people, to explore unfamiliar streets. Those thoughts were quickly followed by guilt, because while I was dreaming, my family was still struggling. I told myself again and again that I had made the right choice, and in many ways, I believed it. Daniel was alive and slowly getting stronger. My parents were no longer facing everything alone. Still, there were moments when resentment quietly appeared in my heart. I did not want to feel that way, but emotions are not always easy to control. One evening, after a long day at work, I returned home, feeling unusually tired. Daniel was sitting at the table doing his homework. His health had improved enough for him to attend school again, which made everyone happy. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "Lena, my teacher said I did very well on my test today," he said proudly. I smiled back and congratulated him. My parents praised him too, and for a moment the house felt full of warmth. But later that night, after everyone went to sleep, I sat alone again. A thought slowly formed in my mind, one that scared me. What if my life would always look like this? What if years passed and I never chased my dream again? I tried to push the thought away, but it stayed there quietly. Time continued moving forward. Daniel grew stronger each year. His grades improved, and he began talking about his own future. He was intelligent and hardworking, just like my parents had always hoped. Eventually, he graduated from high school with excellent results. I remember the day he received his acceptance letter to a respected university in the city. My parents were overjoyed. When Daniel told me the news, I hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you," I said sincerely, and I truly meant it. But that night, after the celebration ended, I lay awake again staring at the ceiling. Another dream was beginning in our family, and this time, it wasn't mine. Daniel moved to the city for university a few months later. The house suddenly felt quieter without him. My parents continued their daily routines, and I kept working at the printing shop. Years had passed since I gave up my chance to study abroad. Sometimes I wondered if anyone still remembered that dream. Even I was starting to forget what it once felt like. But deep inside my heart, something small and fragile still remained. A quiet hope that maybe one day, somehow, my life would change again. I just didn't know how. Years continued to pass quietly. Life became predictable, almost too predictable. Every morning I woke up early, walked the same streets to the printing shop, and returned home in the evening to the same small house where I had grown up. Sometimes I wondered when exactly my life had become so quiet. My parents were getting older now. My father's hair had turned mostly gray, and my mother often complained about her tired back after long days at the market. I tried to help them as much as I could. It felt natural to care for them, just as they had cared for me and Daniel when we were young. Daniel, meanwhile, was building his life in the city. He studied hard at university and rarely came home except during holidays. Whenever he visited, the house felt lively again. He always brought stories about his classes, his professors, and the friends he had made. I loved listening to his stories. They reminded me of the world beyond our small town. But after he returned to the city, the silence would come back again. One evening after work, I sat at the kitchen table going through some old papers. The house was quiet because my parents had already gone to sleep. As I opened a small folder, I suddenly found something that made my heart stop for a moment. It was my old university acceptance letter. The paper had become slightly yellow with age, but the words were still clear. I remembered the excitement I felt the day I first read that message. I remembered running home to tell my parents. I remembered Daniel jumping around the room, asking questions about airplanes. For a long time, I stared at the letter. I realized that nearly 8 years had passed since that day. 8 years. The dream that once felt so bright had slowly faded into a quiet memory. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the folder. Then I closed my eyes and sighed. Maybe some dreams are only meant to stay dreams, I whispered to myself. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. It was a normal afternoon at the printing shop. I was organizing some orders when the shop door suddenly opened. I looked up, expecting to see a customer. Instead, I saw someone I had not expected at all. Daniel was standing there. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things. He was supposed to be in the city finishing his final semester. But there he was, smiling widely as he walked toward me. "Surprise!" he said. I laughed in disbelief and hugged him tightly. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I finished my exams early," he replied, "and I wanted to come home." The shop owner kindly allowed me to leave early that day. Daniel and I walked back home together, talking and laughing like we used to when we were younger. When we arrived, my parents were equally surprised and happy to see him. That evening, we shared dinner together and listened to Daniel talk about his final year at university. He seemed confident and proud, but there was also something different about him. He looked more mature, more thoughtful. After dinner, Daniel asked me to sit with him outside on the small porch of our house. The night air was cool and peaceful. For a moment, we simply sat there quietly. Then he spoke. "Lena, do you remember when you gave up your chance to study abroad?" The question surprised me. "Yes," I said slowly. "I have thought about that moment many times," he continued. I looked at him curiously. "You were still very young, but you gave up your biggest dream because I was sick," he said. "You stayed here and worked hard for our family." I smiled gently. "That was a long time ago," I replied. "And it was the right thing to do." Daniel shook his head. "No, Lena, it was more than that. It was a sacrifice." His words made my chest feel tight. Before I could respond, Daniel reached into his bag and took out a thick envelope. "I have something for you," he said. Confused, I took the envelope and opened it slowly. Inside were several documents. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. Then my eyes suddenly widened. It was an acceptance letter from the same university overseas. But this time, the name on the letter was mine again. I looked up at Daniel in shock. "How?" I whispered. Daniel smiled. "For the past few years, I have been saving money from internships and scholarships," he explained. "I also applied for a program that supports international students who delayed their education." My hands began to tremble as I held the papers. "This program accepted you," Daniel continued, "and I have saved enough to cover the rest of the expenses." Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. "You did this? For me?" I asked softly. Daniel nodded. "You gave up your dream for me once," he said. "Now it's my turn to give something back." For a moment, I could not speak. My heart was full of emotions I could hardly describe. All those years of sacrifice, quiet frustration, and hidden dreams suddenly felt different. They had not disappeared. They had only been waiting. I hugged Daniel tightly, crying and laughing at the same time. "You don't know how much this means to me," I said. Daniel smiled warmly. "You deserve to follow your happiness, too." That night, I realized something important. My sacrifice had never been wasted. It had helped my brother grow into the kind of person who understood love, gratitude, and family. And somehow, life had brought my dream back to me in a way I never expected. Sometimes, when we give something up for the people we love, we think it disappears forever. But love has a strange way of returning the kindness we give to others, and sometimes it returns even stronger. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoy learning English through emotional and meaningful stories like this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Cozy English Story. On Cozy English Story, you will find many inspiring and dramatic stories that help you improve your English listening, learn new vocabulary naturally, enjoy relaxing storytelling while learning. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if you had to sacrifice your dream for someone you love?